A dropship is falling through a red dust storm, and one man is bleeding inside a suit that is already failing. Major Cassian Reese has minutes of oxygen left, no weapon in his hand, and no one answering his calls. Then a stranger steps out of the storm and seals his wound with a living sheet that should not exist. What is it, and why is it hidden? If Cassian tells his command, he could save hundreds. If he tells the wrong man, he could erase an entire community. And the war is already walking this way. Late afternoon over Sable Basin on Damaris, 37 light-years from Earth, the air was thin and full of red grit. The evacuation dropship shuddered inside the dust storm, and the navigation corridor on the panel flickered like a dying pulse. Cassian Reese braced in his harness and watched warning icons bloom across the screen as his oxygen estimate slid down toward less than 20 minutes. The pilot spoke through broken static. "I am losing the corridor. Hold tight." The deck dropped. For a heartbeat, Cassian floated. Then metal screamed and the cabin spun. The crash came like a fist, harness clips snapping as Cassian hit the floor hard enough to see white sparks. Pain flared at his side where something had punched through suit and skin. Warmth spread as blood began to pool inside his clothing, and a faint hiss told him his seal was failing. No voices answered when he called out, only the storm and the hiss of his suit. Cassian forced his hands to work and refused to think ahead. He slapped a seal foam patch across a visor crack until the hiss softened, then checked his wrist gauge again. Oxygen was still falling, steady and indifferent, as if the planet itself had decided he was not worth air. He cut the outer fabric around the wound and packed it with a clotting strip from his field kit. The strip warmed and tightened, buying time the way it had in training. Only now the cabin smelled of dust and torn wiring. Cassian swallowed the urge to shout, because shouting spent oxygen he did not have. His goal became simple and immediate. He had to reach a perimeter beacon before his air or his blood ran out, and he had to do it without leaving a trail that would pull hunters. To anyone who helped him, he crawled out through the broken door and into the storm, using a ridge of rock for cover. The dust hit his suit like sandpaper, and his legs shook with every step. Minutes later, his vision narrowed, and the world dimmed at the edges. Cassian slid down behind the ridge and pressed a gloved hand to his side, feeling the strip hold while strength leaked away. A shape appeared in the moving red curtain, low and cautious, keeping distance the way a sniper keeps distance. Cassian reached for his weapon and found only empty air. His carbine was still inside the wreck, and the wreck was already disappearing under the storm. The figure stopped close enough that Cassian could see dark lenses and layered cloth designed to shed dust. A small speaker on the mask carried a voice in careful trade English. "Do not move. You are leaking. Who are you?" Cassian asked. His throat was dry, and every word felt expensive. "Someone who does not want your death to bring hunters," the voice said. "Seed." Cassian tried to rise on pride and rank. His knees refused, so he sat. The figure pressed a hand to the wound, firm and exact. Then she opened a pouch and pulled out a folded sheet that looked almost alive, translucent, and faintly opalescent even in the stormlight. Cassian stared at it, mind racing despite the pain. If that material sealed him, what else could it seal? And why did she carry it like contraband? "What is that?" Cassian asked. "A veil," she said. "Not yours." She laid it over torn suit and torn flesh. It bonded at once, sealing fabric and skin together with a cool pressure that turned warm. The bleeding slowed, and the suit stopped stealing air. Cassian felt the seal lock in place and realized the central question was no longer about his crash. It was about this thing that could keep a man alive in a storm, and about the woman who said it was forbidden. "My name is Cassian Reese," he said. "Field medic." A pause. "Sarah Vaughn," she replied. "Keeper of the veil." She pointed into the storm. "Walk. Quiet. Slow. If you fall, I leave you." Cassian believed her, and that belief kept him upright. They moved along stone ribs that broke the wind, and Cassian kept counting his breaths, because his gauge kept counting them for him. The bonded sheet flexed with each step, holding the seal without pulling, and Cassian knew this was not a simple bandage. It was a system, and systems always had rules. At last, the storm thinned enough to reveal a narrow fissure in the ground. Warm air breathed out, carrying mineral scent and cleaner oxygen. Sarah tapped a code on a stone panel, and the entrance opened with a soft grind. Inside, low amber lights marked the path. People worked in masks and gloves, carrying water jars, swapping filter cartridges, sorting folded veils on racks as if they were inventory. There were no chants and no idols, only rationing and routine. Cashin caught himself staring at the racks of veils and the clean seal on his own wound. Something this effective would not stay hidden for long, not in a war that treated survival as a resource. He noticed a narrow board on the wall where simple marks track supplies. Water jars were counted, filter cartridges were counted, and even the amber light strips had a schedule. A young worker swapped a spent cartridge, then wrote a mark and sealed the old one in a tin box, as if waste itself could not be trusted. Two keepers passed by with sealed trays, their gloves stained with a pale resin. They spoke to Sarah in a language Cashin could not follow, then glanced at him the way medics glance at a patient who might turn violent. Sarah answered with short phrases and a hand signal that meant stay back. Sarah guided Cashin to a bench and handed him a mouthpiece connected to a small canister. Breathe slow. Cashin inhaled. The air was cleaner, and the ache in his lungs eased. Everything here looked like survival under constraints, not superstition, and that made it more dangerous. They do not want me, Cashin said. They do not want your war, Sarah replied. You came anyway. I did not choose to crash. You chose your uniform, she said, flat and matter-of-fact. Cashin looked past her at a worker whose mask seal had failed. The worker held a cloth to his cheek where dust had chewed the skin raw, and Cashin's hands twitched with habit. I can help, Cashin said. A simple seal and a rinse. Sarah stepped between him and the worker. You do not. Touch without permission. You do not bring your tools into our wounds. Not yet. Cashin swallowed his frustration. Then tell me your rule. Sarah tapped the bonded material on his side. Kintara Film. It binds. It seals. It buys time. It also kills when used wrong. Cashin felt his mind leap ahead, imagining trauma wards that no longer drowned in blood. He also imagined sealed throats and trapped lungs, and the thought made his stomach tighten. Sarah leaned closer, lowering her voice. Once, outsiders asked for one sheet. They said it was for healing. They wrapped it wrong. A child suffocated. The one who gave it never slept well again. It was not a legend. It sounded like a case report and a guilt that aged into policy. What do you want from me? Cashin asked. You rest. You heal. When the storm eases, you leave, Sarah said. You do not bring them here. Cashin forced himself to speak carefully. If my people are wounded near your ridge, will you help them? Cashin asked. Sarah did not answer at once. We help the dying when we can, she said. We do not help the ones who come to take. Learn the difference, Cashin Reese. A distant boom rolled through the rock, artillery or orbital fire, landing somewhere beyond the basin. Dust sifted from the ceiling. Sarah looked toward the entrance. The war is walking this way. Cashin's voice came low. Then we're not safe? Cashin asked. No one is safe, Sarah said. Only quiet for a while. Hours later, the storm loosened its grip and left the sky a dim red instead of solid darkness. Cashin stood at the fissure mouth, suit patched, wound stable, strength returning in careful increments. Sarah handed him a pouch of filters and a single breathstone cartridge. You do not owe me that, Cashin said. I'll my people less trouble, Sarah replied. If you die, they will search for you. If you live, you can make them look elsewhere. Cashin took the pouch. He wanted to promise safety, but he had seen too many promises fail under fire. I will try, he said. Sarah studied him, then tapped the bonded material on his side. Do not turn help into taking. Cashin nodded once and moved into the gully that led back toward coalition lines. Behind him, Sarah remained on the ridge, small against. A world that wanted everyone dead. By the time Cashin reached the perimeter beacon, his cartridge was almost spent. A sentry drone descended, its sensor eye scanning. Identify, the drone said. Cashin Reese, Field medic, evacuation corridor Delta, he answered. 2 soldiers in sealed armor escorted him to transport. Cashin kept his mouth shut and his hands visible, refusing to explain why his wound looked too clean. Gannett Field Hospital smelled of disinfectant and exhaustion. Stretchers lined the corridors, and the hum of failing air systems never stopped. A supply clerk stood beside a rolling cart, crossing off items on a paper list because the terminals kept rebooting. Oxygen masks were stacked and had been labeled for emergency use only, and the bin was already half empty. Cashin caught the clerk's eye and saw the same question he saw in every siege. Who gets to breathe when the filters run out? Dr. Rhea Calder met him near triage, her mask edges fogged. Reese? You should be dead. How are you standing? She asked. Field measures, Cashin replied. We are full. Put me to work. Rhea stared at the sealed wound, then jerked her chin toward the ward. Fine. Move. Cashin worked until his hands shook, sealing punctures, checking pulses, telling people to breathe slow. Each time a patient bled out faster than his supplies could stop, Cashin remembered the way Kintara Film had bonded to him like a second skin. Near midnight, a new team entered, their suits cleaner, their posture controlled. At their center walked a man in a dark coat with simple insignia and a calm that did not belong in a field hospital. Dr. Calder stiffened. Commander, we were not told you were coming. The man looked over the ward, then fixed on Cashin. Major Cashin Reese, you survived a crash in Sable Basin. Congratulations. Cashin felt the attention like pressure on a bruise. Commander Varric Halden, Cashin said. Varric inclined his head, polite. I'm standardizing survival measures in this theater. I am told you returned with unusual stabilization. Cashin kept his face neutral. Many people need stabilization. Yes, Varric said. That is why you will brief my detachment tonight. Cashin heard the words and the intent behind them. Collect, replicate, control. He thought of Sarah Vaughn, the Fisher shelter, the racks of veils marked like inventory, and the rule she had spoken like a warning. Varric stepped closer. Tell me the truth, Major. Where did you learn to live? Varric asked. Cashin knew, with cold clarity, that from this moment Sarah was no longer only his rescuer. She was a target. Varric Halden chose an empty supply room for the briefing, not an office. The air smelled of disinfectant and overheated filters, and the floor vibrated each time a stretcher cart rolled past in the corridor. A single work light hung from a cable, turning dust in the air into a slow red drift. Cashin Reese stood with his back to a metal shelf, hands relaxed at his sides. He kept his face calm, the way he did when a patient screamed. Varric watched him like a man reading a chart, measuring what could be used and what would break. A tablet lit between them, its screen filled with casualty curves and transport routes. Varric did not raise his voice. Major Reese, you survived Sable Basin. That makes you rare, not special, Varric said. Cashin answered evenly. I did not survive alone. Varric nodded, as if that were expected. Then you understand debt. I am offering a way to pay it. He tapped the screen and brought up a list of names, then scrolled to the bottom where the list continued. Cashin recognized several from triage, people whose faces he still carried in his hands. These died because we could not stabilize them fast enough, Varric said. Not because we lacked courage, because we lacked tools. He shifted to a graph, and the line rose with every day of fighting. If Kintara Film saves 1 wounded soldier per day, that is 30 lives in a month, Varric said. If it saves 10, it is 300. You and I both know it will save more than that. Cashin kept his eyes on Varric, not the numbers. Saving lives is the point of medicine. It is also the point of strategy, Varric replied. If our side cannot stabilize wounds, we lose ground. If the Frontier Sovereignty Bloc obtains Kintara Film first, they will decide when our people bleed out. They will decide when negotiations begin. Cashin heard the word decide and felt the hook in it. It sounded like a threat and a promise at the same time. He thought of Sarah Vaughn's voice, flat and precise, and the way her people counted filter cartridges like. Money. You're talking about taking something from civilians, Cashin said. Varric did not flinch. I'm talking about securing a resource in a combat zone. Words matter, Major. He leaned forward just enough to make it intimate. You have seen the source. You have walked the approach. You have been treated. That is information. Information belongs to the theater. Cashin said nothing. Silence was safer than a lie too soon. Varric swiped to a map of the basin rim and the broken ridges around it. A narrow band of terrain was highlighted, with several possible approaches annotated as if the land were already an asset. Your report left gaps, Varric said. Those gaps are not acceptable. Cashin kept his breathing slow. I gave what I could without compromising people who helped me. Varric's expression softened in a way that felt practiced. He gestured toward the corridor, and they stepped out into the ward for a moment. A patient coughed hard enough to bend in half, then pressed a mask tighter, eyes wide with the fear of not getting another breath. Varric did not look away. I admire loyalty, he said. I also manage outcomes. I can close this ward for inspection. I can redirect the next shipment of breathstone cartridges to the front-line units and leave this hospital rationing air. I can assign you to a rear station where your hands will never touch another patient. Cashin heard Dr. Riacalder in his memory, heard the thin wheeze of the old filter bank, saw a bin of masks that was already too light. Varric continued, almost gentle. Where you can help me. One route. One location. One chance to standardize survival. Cashin met his eyes. You could do all of that with a signature? Cashin asked. Varric smiled without warmth. With less than that. Cashin felt his jaw tighten, then forced it loose. What do you want today? Cashin asked. Varric stepped back toward the supply room. Today you tell me how to find the Vari kin, he said. Tomorrow you help me do it. The next meeting was in a mobile lab trailer parked behind Gannett Field Hospital, its walls lined with sealed cases and sterile sleeves. A generator coughed outside, and the trailer lights flickered each time the wind pushed grit into the vents. Inside, everything was labeled, logged, and locked, as if control itself were. The product. Varric stood beside a case marked with a red tag. Cashin recognized the marking system at once. It was the same kind used to quarantine a breach, except here it read like an invitation. Varric opened a drawer and laid out a printed sheet. The headings were simple and polite, and that politeness made Cashin's stomach turn. It is an implementation plan, Varric said, written for oversight. Cashin scanned the lines and saw the language of a committee, not a battlefield. It spoke of stabilization, denial, and compliance. In the subtext, it described ways to lock tissue, ways to occlude an airway, ways to induce controlled necrosis without calling it what it was. Cashin looked up. Those are weapons. Varric did not argue. Those are contingencies. Contingencies reduce uncertainty. Cashin forced his voice to stay clinical. Any living sealant can trap infection. Any material that bonds fast can suffocate if placed wrong. Even in trained hands, you will lose people. Varric folded his hands. Yes, that is why we do not allow untrained hands. That is why we take the source and control distribution. You cannot control panic in a storm, Cashin said. You cannot control a shaking medic with blood on his gloves. Varric's gaze sharpened. I can control access. I can control who carries it. I can control what happens to those who refuse. He reached into a cooler drawer and lifted a clear vial. Inside, a thin film floated like a living sheet, faintly opalescent under the trailer light. This is not enough, Varric said. A sample is a story. A source is a system. Cashin stared at the vial and imagined Sarah watching him from the ridge, telling him not to turn help in a taking. He heard his own question before he could stop it. What happens to Sarah Vaughn? Cashin asked. Varric paused, then spoke as if choosing a dosage. She'll be protected. We will establish a perimeter. We will relocate key personnel for their safety. The Theater Oversight Bureau will sign the orders, and it will be clean. Cashin heard the word clean and thought of restraints wiped down between patients. And if the Vari kin do not agree? Cashin asked. Varric set the vial down and pulled out a compact case made of gray polymer with simple latches. The label read Gray Protocol Kit. This authorizes compulsory measures under biosecurity. Rules, Varric said. It is not cruelty, it is governance. Cashin held Varric's gaze. It is coercion. Varric's voice stayed level. It is prevention. You and I are both preventing death. We simply measure it differently. Cashin stepped closer, lowering his voice. You will call it relocation. You will call it screening. Then you will take their keepers and leave the rest to starve. Varric did not deny it. He only shifted the plan on the screen to a schedule tied to storm cycles. You will guide a small team tomorrow, Varric said. A window opens when the basin wind drops. You will have an escort from the biosecurity special detachment. You will not improvise. Cashin's stomach tightened. You are ordering me to lead you to them. I am ordering you to minimize chaos, Varric replied. Refusal will be noted, and outcomes will follow. Cashin spoke carefully. If I help you, you will not harm them. Varric's eyes did not move. I will do what ends the war faster, he said. Harm is a word civilians use when they do not like math. By morning, the dust storm had thickened again, turning the yard outside the hospital into a red fog. Relay Spire 9 blinked in and out on the operations board, its signal windows shorter each cycle. Every time the link opened, a new list of casualties arrived, and every list was longer than the last. Cashin worked triage until his gloves were slick with disinfectant. He watched a clerk weigh breathstone cartridges on a scale, then slide them into a locked drawer as if they were narcotics. The clerk avoided Cashin's eyes, ashamed and relieved at the same time. Dr. Calder pulled Cashin aside near the oxygen manifold, her voice tight. Halden is taking over my supply chain, she said. He says it is for standardization. Cashin kept his answer brief. He wants something I saw. Calder stared at him. Whatever it is, do not let it turn this place into a lab. People are dying in the hallway. A siren sounded, then cut off, then sounded again. The filters stuttered and the lights dipped, and somewhere down the line a soldier shouted for more masks. Cashin moved back to the ward and found Sergeant Merrick Soule arguing with an armored trooper near cart. The cart held a dozen masks, and the way the trooper stood in front of it said the masks were already gone. We have patients gasping, Merrick said. You do not take these for your team. The trooper's helmet's speaker cracked. Biosecurity priority. Orders from Commander Halden. Cashin stepped between them. These masks stay here. The trooper did not move. Sign the transfer, Major. Cashin saw the paper, red tag, orders stamped and neat, turning breath into inventory. He signed nothing. Instead, he grabbed a mask and placed it on a patient whose lips had gone gray. The patient pulled in a desperate breath and steadied, eyes locking on Cashin with a gratitude that felt like a weight. Merrick exhaled like a man released from clamp. The trooper watched, then turned away. Speaking into his collar mic, Cashin knew that small defiance would be logged. An hour later, a transport truck backed into the staging bay, its lights swallowed by the dust. Varric's detachment assembled in silence. Their gear was clean, their canisters labeled, their drones boxed like folded insects. Varric approached Cashin with a tablet. Ready? Varric asked. Cashin nodded once. I will take you to the ridge approach. Varric studied him, then handed over the route overlay. This is the corridor you will mark. Cashin held the tablet and felt the lie forming like a splint. He could point them close enough to satisfy the escort, then steer them away with terrain and storm. He could buy Sarah hours, maybe a day. He chose a path that would lead into Ashwind Flats, a place of shifting ground and poor cover, far from the Fisher shelter. It was dangerous, but danger could be blamed on weather and enemy patrols. Cashin handed the tablet back. This route avoids the worst drift. Varric accepted it without comment. Good. As the team loaded, a medic sprinted in from the ward, breath ragged behind his mask. Major Reese, we have a thoracic collapse in triage, the medic said. We need you now. Cashin felt the chance open. He could make it real or make it useful. He followed the medic into the ward, found an injured soldier struggling to breathe, and made the emergency real enough to justify the delay. Cashin worked fast, decompressed the chest, sealed the puncture, stabilized the patient with what little they had. When a soldier finally drew a full breath, Cashin felt no pride, only the sharp thought that time was still moving against Sarah. He returned to the staging bay with blood on his sleeves that was not his. The transports were still there, but the air had changed. Varric stood with his arms folded, eyes on the operations board. Varric spoke without anger. You used a real emergency as a schedule tool. Cashin kept his face blank. I use an emergency as an emergency. Varric's mouth moved in something that was almost a smile. Then you will appreciate this. I am changing the plan. He tapped his tablet. A new icon appeared on the map, not at Ashwin Flats, but near the Vermilion Cut. A second team route was already live, launched from a different staging point, bypassing Cashin entirely. Varric leaned closer, voice low enough that no one else heard. Do your best, Major. The outcome will happen with or without your consent. Cashin felt cold spread under his ribs, colder than the storm. He saw Sarah in his mind, not as a savior, but as a woman standing between her people and a machine that called itself prevention. Outside, the dust rose higher, and Relay Spire 9 blinked out again. Dawn came gray-red over the Vermilion Cut, and the wind carried grit like a steady spray. Cashin Reese rode in the back of a sealed transport with his medkit strapped to his chest. The map on his wrist was useless half the time, because the storm kept bending the signal. Varric Halden sat across from him, calm as if they were on a training run. Around them, the biosecurity special detachment checked latches, canisters, and drone cases. No one spoke unless the words were necessary. We are late, Cashin said. We are on schedule, Varric replied. The storm hides us. Outside, dust-screen drones lifted from their crates and fanned into the air. They released a fine charge that pushed dust aside in narrow lanes, making a moving tunnel of slightly cleaner visibility. It was not comfort, but it was enough to see the next 10 meters and to keep weapons from jamming. The team moved into the cut in pairs, boots finding stone where sand would swallow them. Cashin stayed near the center because Varric wanted him visible. It was a leash made of trust. Minutes stretched into hours, and the dust kept shifting the world, so every step felt like a new map drawn. In grit, the first wounded they found were not Varikin. They were coalition scouts, half buried behind a slab of shale, masks cracked, and eyes glassy. One tried to stand and fell again, coughing red foam into his glove. Cashin knelt before anyone could stop him. He pressed a seal patch over the cracked mask edge, then guided the man to breathe through his mouthpiece. Stay still, Cashin said. Slow in, slow out. The scout's gaze flicked to Varric's soldiers. Are you here for us? He asked. Cashin answered, and the words tasted like ash. We are here to get you out. Varric stepped closer and looked down at the scout, as if confirming a label. Tag him, Varric said. Move him to the corridor. Cashin glanced up. What corridor? Cashin asked. Varric pointed to a ridge line where 2 drones hovered, projecting a simple beacon pattern through the dust. Mercy Corridor, Varric said, a safe lane to transport. Cashin heard the name and felt the trick inside it. Mercy was not a lane. Mercy was a choice. They moved deeper. Each time they found a wounded body, Cashin stopped long enough to keep breathing steady and bleeding slow. He used what he had, and he kept his hands visible so the detachment would not call it sabotage. Varric let him work, but only because each pause gathered more people. Wounded men crawled toward the beacons. A few Varikin workers appeared at the edge of the tunnel, drawn by the promise of a safe lane and the sound of human voices. Cashin saw them first, small shapes in dust-worn wraps, carrying water and spare filters. Their masks were simpler than coalition gear, built for repair, not for replacement. One woman stepped forward, her posture guarded, her head turning as she counted rifles. Sarah Vaughn emerged behind her, eyes hidden behind dark lenses. Cashin recognized the set of her shoulders before he recognized anything else. She stopped when she saw him in coalition armor. Her voice came through her mask speaker, flat and controlled. You said you would not bring them. Cashin swallowed. I did not bring them here. They followed a route. Sarah's head tilted, a small movement that carried a hard meaning. Routes do not walk on their own. People do. Behind Cashin, Varric raised a hand, and the detachment shifted. Drones lowered. Canisters were unclipped. It happened without shouting, which made it worse. Varric spoke like a man addressing a community meeting. We are establishing a medical safe lane, he said. Bring your injured. We will screen for infection and treat wounds. Sarah looked past Varric to the beacons, then back to Cashin. This is not a safe lane, she said. Cashin, try to keep the moment from snapping. Sarah, they're wounded here. Let me stabilize them. Then we can talk. Sarah took one step closer, close enough that Cashin could hear her breathing. You made your war a door, she said. Now it is in our home. Cashin felt the truth land, heavy and simple. The storm kept moving, and the beacons kept blinking, and the cut kept filling with people who believed in mercy because they needed to. Red Glass Shelter was never meant to hold this many bodies. By late afternoon, the cramped bunker near Gannett Field Hospital had become a hive of noise and heat, and the air system whined as if it might give up. Breathstone cartridges were stacked like coins, and the stack was shrinking. Cashin pushed through the crowd and smelled blood, disinfectant, and the sharp bite of dust that had made it through filters. A row of patients lay on mats, each one attached to a small oxygen line, each line weaker than the last. Dr. Rhea Calder grabbed Cashin by the sleeve. Your detachment dragged in half the basin, she said. My staff cannot keep up. Cashin scanned the room. He saw Merrick's soul at the far end, pressing gauze into a leg wound and trying not to look at the empty supply cart beside him. I can triage, Cashin said. Rhea's eyes narrowed. Halden has a screening station outside. He says anyone from the Varikin goes through him first. Cashin looked toward the entrance and saw the gray line of canisters. Black cradle canisters stood upright like coffins that could walk. Each one had a seal and a port for air and a small window, so you could watch a face realize it was trapped. A Varikin elder sat on a bench near them, hands bound with soft straps, mask scuffed. A detachment medic adjusted a port and spoke in a gentle tone, as if kindness made confinement acceptable. Cashin forced himself to focus on the nearest emergency. A coalition soldier lay on a mat, chest rising in shallow jerks. A shard had torn into his side, and each breath bubbled through blood. His oxygen mask fogged, then clear, then fogged again. Merrick met Cashin's gaze and shook his head once. They were out of time and out of options. Cashin felt the weight of the pouch in his pocket, the one Sarah had given him in silence, the one he had not reported. Inside was a folded strip of Kintara Film, sealed in simple wrap. He could keep it hidden and protect Sarah for a few more hours. Or he could use it and keep a man alive long enough to reach surgery. The soldier's hand grabbed Cashin's wrist, surprisingly strong. Doc, the soldier whispered. Do not let me drown. Cashin knelt. You are not drowning, he said. Stay with me. He pulled the film out and unfolded it with careful hands. It clung to his gloves as if it recognized warmth. He laid it over the wound, sealing torn tissue and suit fabric in one motion. The bleeding slowed so fast it looked impossible, and the bubbling stopped. The soldier drew a deeper breath. His eyes widened, then softened. Thank you, he said. Several heads turned. A nurse froze mid-step. A detachment trooper shifted his rifle. Not threatening, simply alert. Varric Halden appeared at the shelter entrance, as if he had been waiting for the exact moment. Varric walked in with measured pace and looked at the soldier, then at Cashin's hands. Remarkable, Varric said. Cashin kept his voice low. It is dangerous if used wrong. All medicine is dangerous if used wrong, Varric replied. That is why we standardize. He lifted his tablet and began recording. He did not need a confession. He had a result, witnessed and documented. Varric turned to his detachment. From this moment, all Varikin personnel are to be screened and separated for controlled assessment, he said. Cashin rose. You cannot cage them because I saved a man. Varric's tone stayed calm. I can and I must. This is now a theater-level biosecurity event. Outside, a gust hit the shelter, and the air system coughed. The lights dipped. A patient cried out when his oxygen line went weak. Varric watched the room and saw fear spread like heat. Use it like fuel. A young Varikin worker pushed forward, holding a water jar. He spoke through his mask in broken trade English. We help. We bring water. Why you take? He asked. A detachment medic reached for the worker's arm. The worker jerked back. In the struggle, The medic's glove snagged the worker's mask seal. The seal popped loose, and the worker inhaled a breath of dusty air. He coughed hard and staggered. Someone shouted for a spare mask. Cashin lunged, but he was too late. The worker's panic made him pull his own mask away, and in that moment he breathed in raw grit. He fell, convulsing, and the shelter erupted in frantic motion. Cashin pressed a spare mask down and tried to clear the airway, but dust had already coated the throat. The worker's chest heaved and then stopped. The room fell into a silence that was not calm. It was shock. Varric stepped forward and raised his voice just enough to be heard. "This is exactly why screening is necessary," he said. "They are vulnerable to our environment, and we are vulnerable to theirs." Cashin stared at him. "You caused that." Varric's eyes did not change. "The storm caused that. Disorder caused that. I will remove disorder." Night settled over Gannett Field Hospital, and the wind rattled the outer panels like loose teeth. Inside, the air felt thinner than it had in the morning. The filter bank had been pushed past its safe cycle, and every breath sounded louder. Cashin stood outside the lab trailer and found his access card rejected. The panel beeped once and flashed a simple denial. Merrick Soul approached, face tight behind his mask. "They pulled me from triage," Merrick said. "New orders. I am assigned to Halden Station." Cashin kept his voice even. "Did he say why?" Cashin asked. Merrick hesitated. "He says you cannot be trusted with uncontrolled material. He says your methods are unverified." Cashin felt anger rise and forced it down. Anger would not open doors. Dr. Calder met them near the oxygen manifold, her eyes tired. "Halden signed a directive," she said. "He says the Varikin are a contamination risk. He says you endanger my shelter by introducing unapproved treatment." Cashin looked at her. "A man lived because of it. A man died because of the chaos around it," Calder replied, voice breaking on the last word. "I watched that young worker die in front of me, Cashin." Cashin did not flinch from the truth. "And Halden will use that death to take everything." Calder lowered her gaze. "He already is. He divided my staff. He locked my logs. I cannot even see my own supply ledger." Cashin walked toward the screening station. Under floodlights, black cradle canisters stood in a neat row. Inside one, an elder from a Vari kin sat upright, breathing through a port, eyes fixed on nothing. A trooper wrote notes as if the elder were a specimen. Cashin found Varric near a portable console, his coat clean despite the dust. Varric glanced up and spoke first. "Your access has been restricted," Varric said. "You will not interfere with this process." Cashin stepped closer. "Where is Sarah Vaughn?" Cashin asked. Varric's mouth curved in a small, polite line. "She is not in our custody." "Then where is she?" Cashin asked. Varric's answer was a measured shrug. "Either she has fled, or she has hidden what we need. Either way, she has confirmed the value of her resource." Cashin clenched his hands until the gloves creased. "You are turning a medical discovery into a weapon program." Varric's eyes stayed steady. "I am turning it into an end state. When this war ends, fewer people will need your hands." Cashin leaned in, voice low. "You will end it by breaking a community that did not start it." Varric did not raise his voice. "Communities in combat zones do not get neutrality. They get management." Cashin stared at the canisters, at the bound hands, at the quiet faces behind small windows. He saw the logic Varric was building, step by step, each step clean on paper and dirty in blood. A trooper approached Varric and spoke quietly. Varric listened, then nodded. "We lost the signal window at Relay Spire 9, the trooper said. "We have one short opening before dawn." Varric looked back at Cashin. "By morning, I will have the corridor secured," Varric said. "With or without your cooperation." Cashin felt the walls closing in, not steel walls, but administrative ones. He understood, then, that his skill with needles and patches was no longer the main fight. He turned away from Varric and walked toward the dark edge of the hospital yard. The wind pushed dust against his visor, and he welcomed the sting because it kept him awake. Somewhere beyond Sable Basin, Sarah Vaughn was either running or preparing to disappear into stone. Somewhere inside the hospital, People were being processed like cargo. Cashin breathed in through a weakening filter and made himself a promise that did not need witnesses. He would not win this by saving one patient at a time. He would win it by saving the truth, even if the truth cost him everything. Cashin Reese did not sleep. He sat in the dim supply bay and listened to Gannett Field Hospital breathe through a tired filter bank. Every power dip made the vents change pitch, and every change reminded him that Commander Varric Halden did not need bullets. He only needed air and signatures. Before dawn, Cashin built a record that could not be argued with. He clipped a cold ledger drive to his tablet and pulled every fragment he could reach, triage timestamps, oxygen allotment notes, access denials, and the moment red tag orders began to multiply. He did not write speeches. He wrote sequence: who was moved, who was restrained, who signed, and when the throttling began. He added files that were blunt on purpose. A photo of the flow panel outside the screening bay, the curve dropping in clean steps. A short clip of black cradle canisters lined in a row, faces behind small windows, breath turning the glass dull. A snapshot of the gray protocol kit activation sheet, caught on a clerk's desk when the clerk looked away. When Cashin finished, he copied the drive twice, once to keep, once to lose. He tucked one copy deep in his med kit under sterile wraps, then walked a quiet loop past the screening compound. He wanted to see what Halden believed he owned. Merrick Soul found him near a corridor where the lights flickered. "You are making enemies you cannot treat," Merrick said. "I am making a trail they cannot erase," Cashin replied. Cashin pressed the second drive into Marek's palm. "If they take me, this cannot stay on my body." Merrick closed his hand around it. "Where does it go?" Merrick asked. "Out," Cashin said. "Anywhere Halden cannot edit." A short time later, Relay Spire 9 opened a brief signal window. The operations board chimed. Then Halden's detachment shifted in unison, heads turning toward the relay shack like hunters hearing movement. Cashin could not touch the network. Halden controlled the internal routes, the access keys, and the audit logs. He left through a side hatch and crossed the yard in dust and weak light. Under a parked transport, he met Nalin Voss, the liaison who knew just enough Varikin to be understood and just enough coalition procedure to stay alive. Nalin did not waste greetings. "They're watching the spire. Then we do not use their wires," Cashin said. Nalin held out a tiny relay puck wrapped in filter cloth. The Varikin moved things by hand. Water, cartridges, messages. They call the calm gap in the storm a window of quiet. "It is short, but it is real." Cashin nodded. "Take the drive. Pass it through their shelters. Put it under the spire when the quiet window opens." Nalin stared at him. "They will ask why you should be trusted." Cashin swallowed. "Tell them I'm trying to pull the war back from their door." Nalin took the drive and vanished into the dust. By afternoon, a runner returned with a cloth bundle and a single burst message recorded on the relay puck. The voice was crisp, higher authority, not theater staff. "Evidence indicates coercive deviation. Provide direct proof. Provide a primary witness or source material." Cashin let the message play twice, then closed his eyes. The meaning was brutal. If he could not produce a witness, Halden's story would harden into policy, and the paperwork would protect him. Cashin did not want a political victory. He wanted breathing people. He finally understood those two wants had become the same fight. He opened his eyes and made the next plan. The storm thickened toward evening, turning sensors blind and lungs hungry. Cashin gathered a small team in the shadow of a supply hangar, moving like men and women who already knew they were crossing a line. Juno Kate arrived first, flight suit dusty, face calm. "I can put you down near the cut and lift you out fast." "I cannot make you invisible," Juno said. Lisa Tor came with a portable manifold and spare filters. "If you get locked in a sealed bay, your air will die before your courage does," Lisa said. Nalin Voss returned, mask scuffed, voice tight. "The Varikin shelters still exist. They will not walk into your gates again," Nalin said. Merrick Soul appeared last, slipping past cameras with a medic's practice speed. "They reassigned me to Halden Station. I left a decoy log. It buys us minutes, not hours," Merrick said. Cashin kept the plan simple. We do not shoot Halden. We free the detainees. We pull red tag, orders, and throttle logs. Then we find Sarah Vaughn before he does. Oversight wants direct proof. She is the proof, Cashin said. Juno's gaze sharpened. And if she does not want to be found? Juno asked. Then we convince her we are not bringing another trap, Cashin said. Lisa finished assembling a booster, rough but workable. Storm helps you hide, Lisa said. Storm also eats your filters. You have a hard limit. They moved when the wind shifted. Juno dropped them behind the screening compound where dust screen drones could not see cleanly. Lisa led them to a maintenance hatch she had mapped during earlier repairs, a route meant for technicians, not prisoners. Inside, the screening bay felt colder than outside. The air hissed in timed bursts, controlled by a wall panel that did not care who was breathing. Black cradle canisters stood in a row, each with a port, each with a face behind a small window. Cashin sent Juno to the corridor junction with a small mirror drone, not for combat, only to watch for boots and shadows. Merrick moved to the canisters. Cashin and Nalin went to Halden's portable console where a red folder sat under a weight clip. Inside the folder were fresh orders and an activation sheet for the Gray Protocol kit, stamped with the same time Reglass Shelter began to ration breath. Cashin photographed every page, then slid the folder back as if it had never moved. He pulled one more file from the console, a log showing oxygen flow commands issued from a single authorized wrist tag. Nalin stared at the screen. That is him, Nalin said. It is a chain, Cashin replied. Chains break when you show the link. Nalin used Cashin's stolen token chip to open one latch at a time. Merrick caught each person as they stepped out, guiding them to sit and breathe low. Cashin checked pulses and mask seals with quick hands, then pressed spare cartridges into shaking palms. A Vari kin child, no taller than Cashin's chest, began to cough behind a mask that did not fit. Merrick adjusted the strap and pressed the child's hands down so they would not claw at the seal. Across the bay, an elder swayed on unsteady legs, breath shallow. Cashin felt the room tipping toward the same kind of chaos that had killed the young worker at Reglass Shelter. He forced his voice into the steady tone he used in trauma bays. Sit. Breathe low. Do not waste air, Cashin said. Lisa pushed her booster harder into the line. The hiss strengthened for a moment. Then a soft tone clicked overhead, not a siren, a polite alarm. The bay door locked with a heavy clunk, and the oxygen hiss thinned to a weak thread. Lisa looked at the panel and went pale. Flow is throttling, Lisa said. Juno's voice came through the comm bead, tight. Patrol boots. They're moving to you, Juno said. Cashin understood the counterstrike. Halden did not have to storm the bay. He could wait and let the air do the work. The sealed door opened a short time later, not because they forced it, but because Varric Halden wanted it open. He walked in with two troopers, rifles low, posture relaxed, as if he were arriving to correct a mistake on a form. He looked at the open canisters, the freed detainees, the booster line, and Cashin's team. His eyes went to the wall panel where the flow rate hung low. Major Reese, Varric said, unauthorized interference. Biosecurity breach. Cashin stood between Varric and the freed Varikin. They're not a breach. They're people. Varric's voice stayed calm. People require air. Air requires order. He lifted his wrist. The flow rate steadied, not generous, but enough to stop panic from turning into stampede. Then he held up a sealed pouch. Inside, a strip of Kintara film floated in suspension. I can be reasonable, Varric said. You will be reasonable too. Cashin kept his tone flat. Say it. Varric stepped closer, just inside Cashin's reach. Bring me Sarah Vaughn. Sign a cooperation statement for controlled integration. In return, I release these detainees and increase oxygen allocation to Reglass Shelter for the next shift cycle. Your wounded will breathe. Your shelter will quiet. Marik's voice cut through. You are bargaining with breath, Merrick said. I am managing scarce resources, Varric replied. You understand scarcity. You live inside it. Cashin felt the trap aimed at his profession. If he signed, people would breathe longer tonight, and Sarah would become a tool. If he refused, Varric could tighten the throttle and call it prevention, then point at Cashin as the cause. Cashin asked the question that mattered. And when you have her, what happens to the Vari kin? Cashin asked. Varric did not blink. They become a managed population. Their material becomes standardized. Their risk becomes contained. That is mercy at scale. Cashin heard the distortion. Mercy turned into a spreadsheet. He looked at the detainees, at the child trying not to cough, at the elder holding posture through weakness. He looked at Marek's hands, at Lisa's trembling grip on the booster line, at Juno watching the corridor like a door about to collapse. Cashin held out his hands. Give me the statement. Varric's mouth curved in small satisfaction. He offered the tablet. Cashin took it, looked at the signature line, and dropped it to the deck. He crushed the screen under his boot until it cracked. Varric's expression flickered, surprise for a heartbeat. Then it hardened into something colder than anger. I will label you obstruction, Varric said. You already did, Cashin replied. You just want my ink on it. Varric signaled. A trooper produced fresh red strips and began printing new red tag orders on the spot. The printer chirped softly, turning lives into adhesive. Cashin turned to his team. Get them out through the hatch. Now, if you want a body for his report, I will be the body. Nalin guided the freed Vari kin toward the maintenance route. Juno moved with him, mirror drone drifting ahead as a silent lookout. Lisa kept the booster line steady until the last person passed, then disconnected it and shoved the manifold into her bag. Merrick stayed one beat longer, eyes on Cashin. Come with us, Merrick said. Cashin shook his head once. If I run, Halden locks the bay and calls it a riot. If I stay, he needs a cleaner story. Varric stepped close enough that Cashin could hear the seal hiss at his mask edge. You could have ended this clean, Varric said. Cashin met his eyes. Clean is your word, not mine. The troopers cuffed Cashin and pulled him toward the door. He did not resist. Resistance would become Varric's excuse. As Varric checked the restraints, Cashin let his fingers brush Varric's belt clip. A thin master key tab, small and cold, slid into Cashin's palm. Varric did not notice. He did not imagine a medic would steal while being labeled. Outside, the wind rose again and the hospital lights dimmed. Somewhere in that red noise, Sarah Vaughn was either hiding or being hunted. Cashin held the key tab and understood the new fight. Saving hands were not enough. He would have to save records, signatures, and the truth behind them, even if it cost him his uniform. The first shells landed before sunrise, far enough to be felt more than heard. The ground under Gannett Field Hospital trembled in short pulses, and the old filter bank changed pitch as if it were swallowing fear. In a screening compound, floodlights made the dust look like falling rust. Cashin Reese sat on a bench with soft restraints around his wrists. A trooper stood nearby, not aiming a rifle, only watching the airline panel the way a clerk watches a ledger. Cashin had seen the same look on supply staff when breathstone cartridges ran low. Varric Halden entered without hurry, coat clean, mask seal perfect. He carried a tablet and a small sealed pouch with a pale film floating inside, as if he wanted the evidence to be visible. You picked your moment, Cashin said. I pick outcomes, Varric replied. Moments are just tools. A distant impact rolled through the yard. The floodlights flickered, then steadied. The oxygen panel by the canister row beeped once, then returned to its low hiss. Cashin tilted his head toward the line of black cradle canisters. Inside, faces moved in slow, careful breaths. A child sat upright in one canister, hands pressed to the window, trying not to cough. You can increase flow, Cashin said. You can do it now. Varric glanced at the panel, as if it were a minor detail. Flow is within protocol. Protocol is choking them, Cashin said. That child will panic when the next power dip hits. Varric's eyes stayed flat. Then the child should be moved to a controlled environment. You are the controlled environment, Cashin said. You built it. Varric leaned closer, voice low enough to feel private. You want a confession. You want me to say the quiet part out loud. Cashin met his gaze. Say it anyway. Varric did not deny him. I will end this war under my terms, Varric said. Not the generals. Not the politicians in orbit. Me. A stable supply of Kintara Film means my casualties drop, my units hold, and my bargaining power rises. When the other side bleeds longer, they talk sooner. A second impact landed closer. A lamp blew out with a pop, and the compound dimmed on one side. The oxygen panel chirped again, and the hiss thinned for a breath, then returned. In 3 canisters, people shifted as the airline stuttered. Cashin flexed his fingers against the restraints and felt the small master key tab in his palm. He had kept it hidden when the troopers searched him because no one expects a medic to steal tools. "You are still calling it mercy," Cashin said. "Mercy is a word for the public," Varric replied. "Control is the mechanic." Cashin took a slow breath. "Then show the public your mechanic." Varric frowned slightly. "What are you doing?" Varric asked. Cashin leaned forward as if his wrists hurt and slid the key tab into the panel seam when the trooper looked at the lights. The latch clicked open, soft as a cough. Cashin did not raise the flow. He opened the panel log screen and hit record, then angled the screen toward Varric like a mirror. "Commander Halden," Cashin said, loud enough for the nearest troopers to hear. "I am requesting emergency override for detainee oxygen flow due to incoming bombardment." Varric's eyes narrowed. "You do not have authority to make requests like that." "I am making it anyway," Cashin said. "Override is one tap. People are already desaturating." Varric looked at the canisters, then at the troopers. He understood the trap. If he overrode, he admitted the throttle was his choice, not a necessity. If he refused on record with people visibly struggling. Varric kept his voice even. "Request denied. Maintain protocol." A young detainee coughed inside a canister and slid down the wall. The child pressed both hands to the window and shook their head, breath shallow and fast. Cashin held the panel steady. "Denied under what reason?" Cashin asked. "Chain of command. Biosecurity integrity," Varric said. Cashin turned slightly, so the screen captured Varric's face and the canister row behind him. "You are choosing paper over breath." Varric's jaw tightened. "End the recording," Varric said. Cashin kept his voice flat. "Make me," Varric signaled to a trooper. The trooper stepped forward to pull Cashin away from the panel. In that movement, Cashin thumbed the transmit icon tied to the relay puck port. A tiny progress bar crawled across the screen. Outside, the storm shifted and gave them a brief calm gap, the kind of Kin called a window of quiet. Relay Spire 9 would open soon, short and watched, but a raw log pushed through the right path could still reach orbit. Varric saw the progress bar and understood what Cashin had done. For the first time, Varric's calm cracked into something like urgency, not anger, but risk. "You think this changes anything?" Varric asked. "It changes who gets to sign the next order," Cashin replied. The next shell hit closer than the others. The compound shook hard enough that dust poured off the floodlight frames. A power relay popped, and the oxygen panel went dark for 2 heartbeats. In those 2 heartbeats, the canister row turned into a chorus of muffled panic. Cashin felt the trooper grip his shoulder, trying to pull him away. Cashin twisted just enough to slam the master key tab into the manual latch. The canister latches did not open all at once. That would have been a riot. Cashin popped one, then another, the ones where breathing had already gone shallow. He moved like a medic in a mass casualty, not like a hero. Merrick's soul appeared at the far end of the row, face streaked with dust, moving fast. He had returned the way medics return, through a gap that should not exist. "Keep them low," Merrick said. "No running." Cashin nodded. "Where is Sarah?" Cashin asked. Merrick jerked his chin toward the corner where 3 canisters sat under extra straps. "There." They caught her on a sweep. Cashin crossed the row, boots sliding in grit. Sarah Vaughn sat in the corner canister, mask intact, eyes steady behind dark lenses. She did not look afraid. She looked furious. Cashin opened the latch and stepped back. "I am sorry," Cashin said. "Sorry is air," Sarah replied. "It runs out." Varric's troopers moved in. Varric himself stepped between them and the detainees, not to protect the detainees, but to protect the story. Shells were still coming, and if bodies piled up under his authority, the record would stain him. "We are evacuating to Red Glass Shelter," Varric said. "Under my control." "Not under your control," Cashin said. Varric's gaze sharpened. "You cannot win this with theatrics. You cannot outsign me." Cashin glanced at Sarah. "Can you end the source?" Cashin asked. Sarah's posture went rigid. "If you mean the Veil Seed cache, yes." Varric's eyes flicked. "Veil Seed? So there is a cache." Sarah looked at Cashin, not at Varric. "It is not a weapon. It becomes one when you strip it from context." Cashin kept his voice steady. "We neutralize it so no side can take it." Varric stepped forward. "You will destroy a tool that could save thousands?" Varric asked. Sarah answered flat. "It saves when used with restraint. Your restraint is paperwork." Another impact landed. The compound lights dimmed again. The oxygen hiss collapsed into a weak whisper. Lisa Tor pushed through a side door with her manifold bag. Juno Cade followed, dragging a small sled with spare cartridges and a battered relay puck. Nalin Voss was behind them, coughing into his mask, but moving. "We have minutes before the next power drop," Lisa said. "If you want to move people, move them now." Cashin pointed to the detainees. "Get them out," Cashin said. Merrick began guiding the freed Varikin toward the maintenance hatch, one hand on shoulders, one hand on mask seals. Juno took the child first, lifting them onto the sled and buckling a strap. Nalin moved behind the elders, translating with gestures and short phrases. Varric watched the flow of bodies and understood he was losing control in real time. He did not raise a rifle. He reached for his wrist tag because his weapon was still oxygen. "I can throttle Red Glass Shelter next," Varric said. "I can make you choose again. You will sign, Major." Cashin stepped closer. "You will not have the wrist tag long enough." Varric's eyes narrowed. "You will shoot me?" Varric asked. "No," Cashin said. He held up the relay puck. Its indicator light blinked, meaning it had received a response burst. Cashin tapped play. A calm voice filled the compound speaker, not Varric's voice. An orbital authority voice. "Commander Varric Halden, your biosecurity authorization is suspended pending review. Stand down and surrender all red tag orders, the gray protocol kit, and detainee control. Compliance is mandatory." Varric froze. For the first time, his world of signatures turned against him. He recovered fast. "This is a delay tactic. Theater needs me," Varric said. The voice continued, colder. "Non-compliance will be treated as unlawful coercion. Local command is instructed to secure you." Two troopers, who had been watching Cashin, shifted their stance, suddenly unsure which orders were safe. Varric looked at their hesitation and understood his leverage was gone. Cashin turned to Sarah. "The cache," Cashin said. Sarah nodded once. "Follow," Sarah said. They ran into the storm with just enough cover from dust screen drones that were now unguided, their patterns drifting. Sarah led them to a fissure mouth hidden by rock ribs. The air out of it was cleaner than the yard, a quiet breath from below. Inside, racks of folded film lined the wall, each one counted and sealed. In the back, a stone alcove held small clay jars, each jar marked with a simple scratch pattern. "Veil Seed the beginnings." Sarah knelt and opened one jar. Inside was a dark gel that moved slightly as if it were alive. "You destroy it?" Cashin asked. "You unmake its value," Sarah replied. "We flood it with salt and heat. It becomes inert. No one can scale it fast." Lisa set up a heater coil from her kit, powered by a compact cell. Juno cracked a salt pack meant for field rehydration and poured it into a basin. Nalin held his breath and watched, as if witnessing a funeral for a miracle. Sarah poured the gel into the basin and stirred with a metal rod. The gel clumped, then dulled, losing its sheen. Varric's voice echoed from above, faint through rock. "You are making a mistake. You are erasing power." Sarah did not look up. "Power erases people," Sarah said. When the last jar was neutralized, the racks still held film already made, enough to save a handful today. Not enough to win a war. That was the point. As they climbed back toward the fissure mouth, Merrick stumbled in, dragging a wounded detainee whose mask had cracked. Marek's own cartridge was nearly empty. "Take mine," Merrick said, pushing his cartridge toward the wounded. "Sasian greb de Marikis rist." "Do not," Cashin said. Merrick met his eyes. I can hold my breath longer than he can, Merrick said. Cashin saw the truth and hated it. Merrick slid the cartridge into the wounded mask line, and the wounded man took a deeper breath, eyes clearing. Marek's own breathing turned thinner, but he kept moving one step at a time, refusing to fall where someone would have to carry him. When they reached the yard, security teams were already taking Varric into custody. He did not fight. He stared at Cashin as if looking at a statistical anomaly that had escaped the model. You will regret this, Varric said. Cashin answered quietly. I already do. I just regret something else more. Weeks later, the dust still rose over Sable Basin, and the war still ground forward in other sectors. What changed was smaller, and that was why it mattered. A real mercy corridor was established, not a beacon trap, but a supervised medical lane with independent monitors from orbit and sealed audit logs that could not be edited by theater staff. Every oxygen throttle change required 2 signatures from separate chains, and every detainee canister required a clinician approval recorded in a public ledger. The Varikin received a protected zone around their Fisher shelters, not a prize, a boundary. Patrols were kept out unless invited, and any screening required external oversight. Sarah Vaughn negotiated the terms with a voice that never rose, because she did not need volume to be immovable. Cashin Reese was not given medals. He was given paperwork. He was reassigned, rank held in review, access restricted, and his name attached to words like insubordination and mission interference. Dr. Rhea Calder signed a statement that he had saved lives, and the statement was filed under operational inconvenience. Cashin built a small aid station on the edge of Gannett Field Hospital, a place where wounded from any side could be stabilized before questions began. It was not heroic. It was cramped, underpowered, and always short on cartridges. Sarah visited once, bringing 2 folded sheets of film and a box of simple filter gaskets. I cannot make more fast, she said. Not anymore. Cashin nodded. I did not want a factory. I wanted you alive. Sarah looked at the aid station, at the mixed line of injured waiting quietly, and her shoulders loosened by a fraction. You brought war, she said. I brought it, Cashin replied. Then I try to bring back a boundary. Sarah placed the gaskets on the table. A boundary is a promise you keep when it costs you. Cashin watched her turn toward the red horizon. The storm was still there, and the war was still there, but the lane between them had changed shape. He understood the pulse beneath it all, simple and unromantic. A vow becomes real only when it costs breath, comfort, and reputation, and he had started paying in all 3. The war did not end, but one corridor finally meant what it said. Cashin watched the red dust drift across the Mercy corridor lights, each pulse steady, each breath accounted for by something stronger than a signature. He did not get a medal. He got forms, hearings, and long silences from people who preferred clean stories. Still, every time a stranger stepped onto his cot and he asked about a wound before he asked about a uniform, he felt the vow settle into something real. Sarah stayed with her people, not as a myth, but as a guardrail. When she left 2 folded sheets of Kintara film on his table, it was not a gift of power. It was a reminder that mercy only works when no one owns it. Somewhere beyond Sable Basin, the front line shifted again, and another storm began to build. Cashin tightened a filter seal, checked a pulse, and kept his hand steady. The truth had a cost, and he was still paying it, one breath at a time. If this story moved you, please hit like, share it with someone who still believes compassion can survive a war, and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next chapter.